I stood frozen in shock as my father's classic 1986 Ford F-150 burned in my driveway, black smoke billowing into the morning sky. Eleanor Vance, president of the Whispering Pines Estates HOA, in her pristine blue suit, pointed an accusing finger at me while flames consumed 30 years of memories. Her face twisted with self-righteous fury as she screamed over the roaring fire, completely unaware that yesterday I was sworn in as the new mayor with emergency powers over every HOA in the city. What happens when she realizes she just committed arson against her new boss? For 22 years, I'd lived peacefully in my Greenwood Acres home. I'm Arthur Jenkins, 55 years old, a civil engineer who kept to himself and minded his own business. Long before luxury homes and manicured lawns dominated our neighborhood, this was a place where middle-class families could afford the American dream. Everything changed 7 years ago when developers bought the adjacent farmland and constructed the estates at Whispering Pines, starting at triple what most original residents had paid. Our modest neighborhood was suddenly rebranded as the heritage section of an upscale community. Property taxes soared, and longtime neighbors who couldn't keep up were forced to sell. That's when Eleanor Vance moved in and formed the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. A former corporate attorney from Chicago, she approached neighborhood management like a military campaign. Within months, she created a 78-page rulebook governing everything from acceptable mailbox designs to which day Christmas decorations must be removed. Those of us from the original neighborhood found ourselves under constant scrutiny. For most, it was easier to comply than fight, but I had one possession I refused to sacrifice to Eleanor's vision of suburban perfection: my father's 1986 Ford F-150 pickup truck. Dad bought the truck the year I graduated high school. Every Saturday for decades, we'd work on it together, replacing parts, maintaining the engine, keeping the faded blue paint pristine. When he passed away after a long battle with cancer, the truck became my most treasured possession. Every time I turned the key in that ignition, I could hear Dad's voice. "Listen to that purr, Art. They don't make M like this anymore." I kept the F-150 in my driveway, covered when not in use, and drove it sparingly to preserve its condition. It wasn't just transportation, it was a living memorial to my father. The last project we'd started together was converting it to run on biodiesel, work I continued alone after he passed, taking my time to honor his environmental foresight that had always been ahead of his time. As a hydrologist for the county water department, he taught me the importance of protecting our natural resources. His biodiesel conversion was his way of making his beloved truck eco-friendly. I completed most of the work using the collection system he designed to collect used cooking oil from local restaurants for processing. The truck became Eleanor's obsession after our neighborhood faced a historic drought. Greenwood Acres sat atop an aquifer that had supplied our original homes for decades, but the new McMansions were draining it dry. She ambushed me one Saturday morning while I was filtering biodiesel. "Mr. Jenkins," she announced, clipboard clutched like a weapon, "your experiments violate our environmental regulations." I pointed to my setup. "This closed-system processor is actually reducing environmental impact, not causing it." She dismissed this with a wave. "Our consultant says any unauthorized processing near our water source poses contamination risks. The bylaws clearly prohibit potential groundwater hazards. This system has been here decades, long before your bylaws," I countered. "My father designed it to be environmentally safe. He worked for the county water department for 30 years. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Your father's outdated methods don't meet our standards. The new development's golf course and pools require pristine water. 2 weeks to dismantle it." I presented my state environmental certification. "This setup exceeds all county regulations. It's more sustainable than those gas-guzzling SUVs in the new section." "Bylaws are bylaws," she replied icily. 2 weeks, Mr. Jenkins. That's when I saw the truth. This wasn't about the environment, but control of resources. Eleanor was securing exclusive water rights for the new development while casting original residents as wasteful and irresponsible. I refused to comply. The 2-week deadline passed. The battle had begun. Eleanor's campaign against my sustainable truck project intensified methodically. First came violation notices claiming unauthorized chemical storage. When I produced EPA-approved containment certification, she pivoted to aesthetic violations of the biodiesel processing equipment. The financial penalties mounted quickly: $100 for the first week, $250 for the second, eventually reaching $500 per week. Within months, I'd accumulated over $122,000 in fines that I refused to pay. Each time, I responded with documentation on my environmental permits and water conservation data. What I didn't suspect then was the depth of Eleanor's deception. While she preached conservation to original residents, the new development consumed triple the water per household. Their fountains, pools, and golf course were rapidly depleting the aquifer we all depended on. At monthly HOA meetings, Eleanor weaponized environmental fear. She projected doctored water quality reports while narrating like a prosecutor. "These DIY fuel operations threaten our community's water supply," she'd tell concerned neighbors. "The county's outdated regulations aren't protecting us." The truth was exactly the opposite. My biodiesel operation used zero water and prevented waste oil from entering landfills. Meanwhile, the development's new golf course was using chemical fertilizers that actually threatened the aquifer. The community began dividing along clear lines: original residents who practiced conservation versus newcomers consuming resources at unsustainable rates. Vivian Holloway, a retired environmental science teacher who lived across the street, actually conducted her own water quality tests to counter Eleanor's claims. "Arthur's biodiesel setup isn't the problem," she reported at one contentious meeting. "It's the 120,000 gallons per month being pumped to maintain the golf course during a drought. That's the equivalent water usage of 65 original homes." Eleanor's response was immediate and calculated. Within a week, Vivian received violation notices about her unsightly yard, rainwater collection barrels, and solar panels. The message was clear: support Jenkins and you're next. The final escalation came when Eleanor installed environmental monitoring equipment on HOA property aimed directly at my biodiesel setup. She claimed it was for water safety purposes, but the invasion of privacy was obvious. While Eleanor escalated her tyranny, I was quietly making chess moves of my own. For years, I'd served on the County Water Conservation Board, earning respect from environmental groups throughout the region. The opportunity came when Mayor Thompson announced he wouldn't seek re-election. That same evening, my phone rang. "Arthur, we need someone who understands water rights," said Maria Santos from the Conservation Alliance. "The drought is getting worse. The developers are getting stronger. Will you run?" My campaign strategy was surgical: focus on water security while never mentioning my HOA battle. I knocked on doors in neighborhoods far from Whispering Pines, emphasizing my engineering expertise and my father's environmental legacy. "But aren't you the guy fighting with the Whispering Pines HOA?" one voter asked, recognizing me. "This campaign isn't about personal disputes," I replied. "It's about protecting resources for everyone." Election night was a thriller, results seesawing until 3 a.m. when I finally won by just 327 votes. The margin was so thin that Eleanor, focused exclusively on her wealthy enclave, never bothered to connect Arthur Jenkins on campaign signs with her troublesome neighbor. Then fate dealt the perfect card. Mayor Thompson suffered a stroke 3 days later. The city charter required immediate succession, leading to a private emergency swearing-in yesterday at dawn. Only my wife witnessed me take the oath. "Should we tell the neighbors?" she whispered after I smiled. "The timing will announce itself." Saturday, 7:36 a.m. I stood at my kitchen window, sipping coffee, the weight of my new mayoral responsibilities still sinking in through the early morning mist. The sun glinted off my father's truck. I just completed the biodiesel conversion system we designed together years ago. The latest water conservation report sat on my counter, showing alarming depletion of our community aquifer. Then I saw them. 3 figures approached my driveway with purposeful strides: Eleanor in her trademark blue blazer, flanked by 2 men in hazmat-style coveralls bearing a logo reading AquaGuard Environmental. One carried a red canister, the other a professional camera with a telephoto lens. I bolted outside, barefoot, still in my pajama bottoms. Stop. What are you doing on my property? Eleanor turned, clipboard in hand, lips curled in that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. We're conducting an emergency environmental remediation, authorized under Emergency Bylaw 8.3 Paragraph C regarding groundwater contamination threats. One man was already uncapping the canister, methodically pouring clear liquid around my truck and biodiesel processing equipment. The smell hit me instantly. Gasoline. Are you insane? You're pouring gasoline near my biodiesel setup. I lunged forward, but the second man blocked my path, camera recording my every move. We've documented 47 separate environmental violations over 3 years, Eleanor announced with rehearsed precision, flipping through papers. Our water quality tests show concerning chemical signatures matching your unauthorized fuel processing. The board has unanimously authorized immediate neutralization of this hazard. You're lying. My system is certified by the EPA. I shouted, trying to push past the cameraman. Your own tests proved nothing wrong with the water. This is criminal trespassing. Eleanor's face hardened. The HOA has declared a water emergency, which supersedes individual property rights when community health is at stake. I sputtered, watching her appointed men. They're pouring gasoline, an actual groundwater contaminant, all over a sealed biodiesel system that's never had a leak. This is insanity. The man with the canister stepped back, nodding to Eleanor. In one fluid motion, he produced a silver lighter. No! I screamed, lunging forward, too late. Click. Spark. Ignition. The gasoline trail erupted in flames, racing around my father's truck and biodiesel equipment with unnatural speed. The heat blast forced me backward as fire enveloped everything, intense orange flames consuming years of sustainable engineering in seconds. Black smoke billowed skyward as the fire roared. The truck's biodiesel tank could explode any moment, endangering homes nearby. The acrid smell of burning rubber, vegetable oil, and melting equipment filled the air. My knees buckled, hands clutched my head in disbelief, mouth hanging open. The last physical connection to my father's environmental legacy, gone in an instant. The two men backed away, clearly startled by the ferocity of the blaze they'd created, but Eleanor stepped forward, finger thrust toward me accusingly, face contorted with self-righteous fury. Your truck is polluting our community water source, she screamed over the roaring flames. We warned you for years. Everyone else follows water restrictions except you. This is what happens when you think you know better than experts. Her voice carried across the neighborhood as residents emerged from their homes in robes and pajamas, phones recording the unfolding disaster. The burning truck, Eleanor's environmental accusations, my devastated expression. Let this be a lesson, she projected theatrically. Our water safety is non-negotiable. We will not let one stubborn man's amateur experiments threaten our children's health. A biodiesel container exploded, sending glass shards flying. The two men who'd set the fire were now backing toward their unmarked van, clearly recognizing they'd crossed a dangerous line. Vivian Holloway rushed over from across the street, garden hose in hand, futilely trying to contain the blaze. Someone call 911, she shouted. The irony is unbelievable. They're creating an actual toxic fire directly above the aquifer. Through my shock and horror, something shifted inside me. The grief gave way to an icy clarity I'd never experienced before. Without rushing, I walked forward until I stood directly opposite Eleanor, the burning truck between us like some sacrificial altar. Time seemed suspended in that hellish tableau, my father's legacy crackling in flames, neighborhood security cameras capturing everything, morning sunlight illuminating Eleanor's triumphant expression as she continued her tirade. The intense heat seared my face even from 10 feet away. Through it all, Eleanor performed for her audience, voice rising over the fire's roar. This neighborhood has standards that must be maintained, she shouted. No one is above the rules. Not even you, Mr. Jenkins. Distant sirens wailed as firefighters responded to multiple 911 calls. Neighbors gathered in shocked clusters, many filming with their phones. The two men who had poured the gasoline were now attempting to slip away unnoticed. A strange calm washed over me. The shock gave way to something else, a crystallizing clarity I'd never experienced. Without raising my voice, I spoke with unnatural composure. "Eleanor Elizabeth Vance," I said, my tone cutting through the chaos. "As a private citizen, I ask, did you personally authorize these men to commit arson on my property?" She blinked momentarily, thrown by my calm demeanor. "This is standard violation enforcement under Bylaw 8.3. Yes or no, Eleanor?" I interrupted. "Did you instruct these men to pour gasoline on my truck and ignite it?" A simple question requiring a simple answer. Her chin lifted defiantly. "The board authorized removal by any necessary means. This vehicle has been documented as a persistent violation." "What you've done," I said, each word deliberate, exceeds any conceivable HOA authority. "You've committed criminal trespass, destruction of private property, arson, and creation of a public hazard that threatens every home on the street." Uncertainty crept into her expression. Until now, no one had ever challenged her authority so directly. "You clearly don't understand HOA legal jurisdiction. Our bylaws specifically, the HOA," I said with perfect clarity, "has no legal right to set fire to private property. What it does have, as of yesterday morning at 7 a.m., is a new legal obligation to operate under direct municipal oversight." Sirens grew louder as fire trucks turned onto our street. The crowd had swelled to nearly 30 neighbors, smartphones documenting everything. Even Eleanor's closest allies from the estate section stood slack-jawed at the blazing F-150 that now threatened nearby homes. Without breaking eye contact with Eleanor, I reached into my pocket and withdrew a leather credential wallet. "As of yesterday at 7 a.m., I said, voice carrying across the gathered crowd, all homeowners associations in this jurisdiction operate under Emergency Municipal Order 290, establishing direct oversight of HOA activities." With deliberate slowness, I flipped open the wallet, revealing the gold mayoral badge and an ID card with my photograph. "I, Arthur James Jenkins, was sworn in as mayor of Greenwood Acres yesterday morning due to former Mayor Thompson's incapacitation." Time seemed to stop. The only sound was the crackling fire and approaching sirens. Eleanor's face transformed in stages: confusion, disbelief, realization, and finally, absolute horror. The blood drained visibly from her face, leaving her ashen. "Impossible," she whispered, barely audible over the flames. "The inauguration ceremony isn't scheduled until next week. Emergency Protocol 17B was enacted after Mayor Thompson suffered a massive stroke," I explained, projecting my voice for everyone to hear. "The city charter requires immediate succession during crisis. The public ceremony is next week, but I've been the legal mayor since yesterday at 7:04 a.m. From the crowd, Margaret Shaw, a retired judge who lived 3 doors down, stepped forward. "It's absolutely true. I administered the oath myself at the emergency council session. Arthur Jenkins is our current mayor." Eleanor's legs visibly wobbled. She gripped her clipboard with white knuckles, legal papers suddenly worthless. This action was approved at last Thursday's board meeting," she stammered, desperation creeping into her voice. "Before you were, but executed this morning under my jurisdiction," I finished for her. Section 38 of the City Charter explicitly prohibits destruction of private property without judicial order, regardless of HOA bylaws. My voice hardened as I continued, "Eleanor Vance, you have just committed first-degree arson, criminal property destruction, and felony trespass, all captured on video with multiple witnesses. These are criminal acts punishable by up to 15 years imprisonment under state law." The fire department arrived in force, 3 engines and a ladder truck. As they battled the blaze, police cruisers pulled up behind them. The 2 men who'd actually set the fire were now being detained by officers responding to neighbors' calls. I spoke briefly with Fire Chief Rodriguez, then approached Detective Williams, a 20-year veteran of the force. "Detective," I said, still in my pajama bottoms and undershirt, "I need to formally report crimes committed on my property this morning." I provided a concise statement, pointing out the security cameras that had captured everything and the numerous witnesses. Williams nodded grimly, especially when I mentioned Eleanor's role. We've had complaints about this HOA before, he confided quietly. Nothing this extreme, but similar patterns of harassment. This crosses multiple legal lines. Across the driveway, Officers Chen and Gutierrez were interviewing a visibly shaking Eleanor. Her earlier bravado had evaporated completely, replaced by panic gestures and what appeared to be tears. Neighbors approached me one by one, some apologizing for not standing up to the HOA sooner, others sharing their own stories of harassment and unreasonable fines. Even residents from the newer estate section expressed shock at the extreme action taken over what they'd been told was a community standards issue. Harold Jenkins, no relation, hobbled over, his weathered face etched with concern. "I'm sorry about your dad's truck, Art. I know what it meant to you." "Thanks, Harold," I said, watching firefighters extinguish the last flames, leaving nothing but a black and twisted metal frame. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. My wife arrived home from her early shift at the hospital, alerted by frantic calls from neighbors. She held me as we watched the firefighters work the charred skeleton of my father's truck, a stark reminder of how quickly